Welcome to Beyond the Pain, a place for parents of estranged adult children to find peace and healing. In each episode, I hope to share stories to help you during some of your darkest hours, to bring this out of the shadows and stop being ashamed, then to build you up and inspire you to love yourselves even more. Obviously, I've already talked to Michelle, so I know some of the history, but from your perspective, well, I guess let's start out telling us a little bit about you, if you don't mind.
Well, I was raised in a family of nine
Okay.
kids. My dad was a Marine drill instructor, World War II, Korean War. So he was pretty hard
Right.
guy. So I was pretty opposed to like any kind of, uh, spanking or. I had a little temper, but it was all verbal.
Yeah.
But I was really conscious about not spanking kids or things like that because there was it was like a pretty chaotic upbringing,
Yeah.
So
I would imagine with
um,
between having 9 of you and
yeah,
his, job.
and there was actually seven. Like two had died before I was
Okay.
born, but my mom had 9 kids and
Wow.
14 pregnancies. We were raised Catholic, so they took
Gotcha.
that very seriously, right?
Yeah.
So my daughter I had with a girlfriend who was pretty much, you know, she was pretty unstable, and I started the process and got custody of her. It took me about
Right.
2.5 years, maybe from start to finish, to establish
Wow.
paternity to actually get custody of her. And then she was very difficult. And then, we raised a pretty good family. Everyone was fairly normal, and there was a lot of conflict between my wife and that daughter.
Right.
So, but for the most part, we were a pretty happy family. I worked a lot. Like Michelle stayed home with the kids. I worked 2 jobs for like 13 years. I
Right.
was very, focused on providing a home and all of that stuff.
That's what we're told we have to do, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that just seemed like, as a young man, it was like that's how I was going to be responsible. In
Right.
hindsight, I should have probably worked less and spent more time with the kids. However, at the time, it was like I got to feed you. So,
Right.
yeah.
And I mean, you guys had 5, if I recall, altogether.
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah. We had
So,
Philip in 1990, and Emma was born in 96. So,
right. Wow. Well, so yeah, you had your work cut out for you in a lot of ways.
right. Yeah.
So, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 59. I just turned 59.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if she was talking about both of you
Yeah.
the other day or
Yeah.
just her.
She's
So
a little older than me. So
yeah,
I give
okay.
her a hard time. She'll always be older than me, like 3 months. Yeah.
Right.
So,
I know my wife is a little older too. She's a year and a half or year and a
right.
piece. So yeah, make the appropriate jokes there. So
Right.
um, okay, so regarding estrangement, before this kind of stuff happened to you guys with your daughter, had you guys heard anything about it? Was it in your family? Was it friends or anything? Did you know anything about it?
I hadn't called it that. I had known other people in different families or in parts of families that didn't talk to each other and they
Yeah.
were estranged, like a brother and sister who hadn't talked to each other in 30 years and things like that. I
Right.
never really considered it. I never really saw it coming. It just kind of evolved.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know when I looked back in my family, and I didn't. It's funny because I didn't actually look back until somebody said something about generational estrangement or whatever, or family, other family members, and I started looking back, and I'm like, wait a minute, my dad wasn't really around. My sister had issues. My brother had it. I'm
Yeah.
like,
You're right.
Wow, so it's kind of all over, and I never even
Yeah.
thought about it. So, but I don't know some of their circumstances as to how it came
Yeah.
about, if it's similar or what. But I just kind of always thought, well, especially the older generation, probably before us, you know, kids just help with their parents and stayed around their parents, even if they
Yeah.
get along, they stay around. But
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, that was my experience. I had some of the older family and my siblings had a really hard time with my dad and stuff, but they were still in contact and they talked.
yeah,
They were never like, and my dad
well,
was, I mean, he was a pretty good guy as far as he was, he helped him out of scrapes and he was always there.
right,
He wasn't drinking and carousing and stuff. He was a pretty responsible guy. So
yeah. Well, he had, I guess the upbringing and the training with being in the Marines. So Marines, that's what you said,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, he had a rough. My grandfather had a really rough life, so
yeah,
I'm sure his upbringing was a lot rougher than mine.
yeah.
Just kind of dilutes down as it goes through the
That's
generations.
that's my
Yeah,
thought. It's
yeah,
always a matter of perspective too.
you're right.
Um, so obviously, like I said, I talked to Michelle a little bit the other day, but what is your um, perspective on why you think this happened with your daughter?
Well, with my older daughter, um, I think she has some like medical issues, like there's some things going on with her,
Right,
and she's just like she's determined to she's pretty much I could pretty much have a relationship with her if I wanted to.
right.
Um, however, she's trying to drive a wedge between me and my wife. So in
Mm,
order to have that, it's really awkward conversations, lots of anger, lots of outbursts. So I've
gotcha.
kind of chosen to just pull away from that. Like she'll send me a text on Father's Day or something, and I'll be like, "Yeah, I love you." However, I avoid conversation with her. She just can't help but going down that road. I've had
Yeah,
multiple uh, interactions with her where I kind of brought her back to, like, is this what you want? Do you want to be resentful? Do you want all of this hurt in your life? And this is how you want to live? And I'd bring her
right.
out of that and then right back into it. So I pulled back quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's difficult. A person, in my opinion, on either side, whether it's us as the parent or them as the child, because I know, another good friend of mine who I've kind of taken under my wing as another daughter. She's going through something like that with her father, that he's just not there and not responsive.
Right.
So I see it from both sides, but
Yeah.
a person can only take so much before they
Right.
have to, distance themselves. But so that's certainly understandable. But
I,
um,
I'm I put myself to I'm like I'm open to reconciliation. I mean, I love my daughter.
of course,
Um, however, I'm not open to that I'm not open to that abusive um, type of life. You know what I mean? I'm not willing to
absolutely,
walk into that and open the door to that.
yeah,
So that's where
yeah,
that stands. Yeah.
for sure. I mean, it's like you said, it's almost like she's, either it's got to be her or me, and
Yeah.
that's not really
I don't
cool.
I don't even think she's conscious of it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I mean, I think from in her perspective, she's completely justified and everything is the way it should be. And if, my wife wasn't this and that, then everything would be fine. So I can't really, I haven't been able to reach her on that.
yeah. Well, hopefully one day, but it's got to be on both of you. Both of you have to be able to come to a middle ground somewhere. If
Right.
she's not able to do that, then you know,
Yeah. I'm definitely open to it. Just, we'll see.
well, that's good. So have you? I've talked to a lot of different people, and there's all different kinds of opinions and things people have done or have not done. Did you feel the need to have a feeling? I know the answer, but did you feel a need to seek out any professional help or?
No, no.
Okay.
Michelle's had a therapist that she talks to quite a bit, and I've gone with her
Yeah,
several
she
times,
mentioned her. Yeah,
just to help our communication. Just like to help me and Michelle's communication.
yeah,
Um, but I never really felt the need that I needed that.
gotcha.
It doesn't hurt though. I mean, I don't think that it's. I think it's probably a good thing to have someone to talk to who's outside of the situation, who's
Yeah,
unbiased. That you can get feedback from. Who's it's definitely not going to hurt. I'm not against it in any way.
right. Yeah,
But I
she
never
she
thought, oh my world's crumbling. I need to go see a therapist. That just wasn't
right.
in the realm
Well,
of my thinking. No.
it's like with most things, everybody's different. Everybody handles things differently,
Yeah.
and
Right.
there's no necessarily magic bullet to, for everyone. So, but
Sure.
I know she told me about your the person or the lady she goes to see that you guys go sometimes to see, and it's an interesting, take because she's done it for so long, and she considered it like maintenance, which is kind of an
Yeah.
interesting take on it. So, um,
Sure.
but um, did you have any coping mechanisms? I mean, I know you said your world wasn't falling apart, but is there anything that helped you not think about it or
Well,
think
I know.
about it?
Yeah, I know Michelle talked to you about some of this stuff that we had done, the personal growth work, and
Yeah.
she had told you, she had mentioned Eckhart Tolle, and
Hmm.
um, I did a personal growth class in like 2007. That was time me and Michelle were really struggling. We had teenage kids. We were going through like so we went to this. She brought me to this class, right? And
Yeah.
we were at a place of we were almost going to get a divorce. It was really, and the class taught a lot about responsibility, but being a victim versus being responsible. And I
Right.
realized how many areas in my life where I was being a victim, like this is happening to me because all of these people are treating me bad or all these things. And then I took a different perspective and started taking responsibility for everything in my life. So if I had a bad relationship with Michelle, then I went and started communicating better and started. So this was very impactful for me.
Hmm.
And then at the same time, she had bought me this book, The Power of Now, which is Eckhart Tolle book.
Oh, right, right.
And so I started reading that book and I just immersed myself in that. And it's very, I mean, he's a big time spiritual teacher,
Sure.
um, and then, through that teaching, then I built a lot of different coping mechanisms that I never had before.
Right.
Uh, it's about probably the biggest is being aware of your thinking. So being the watcher of your own mind, right? So
Hmm.
if I'm having, thoughts come you know, just come up on automatic, something comes up and
Right.
I'm feeling some way, I can look at that feeling and say, is that really what I want? And then be aware of it,
Right.
and then change my thinking, change my feelings. Now you got to be careful because if you just stuff all your feelings, they're going to blow out at some point. So
For sure.
just watching, is this the life I want? Do I want to, do I want to spend my whole life in angst and unhappy and resentment and all of these things when all I have to do is change the way I look at the world and those are all gone. So,
Yeah.
um, so that just worked with that. That's just,
Cool.
how that, yeah.
Isn't that, you know, it's kind of amazing that you can something so seemingly small can
Yeah,
make such a difference,
sure.
you
For sure.
know.
And
Um,
so much
yeah.
from my experience, so much of my thinking is automatic. Like it just comes forth without me bringing it forth. It just is there. It's subconscious.
Oh
If
yeah.
someone says something to me, I have a built-in reaction that comes up. If I feel wrong or something, then there's that emotion that comes up. But if I look at it and say, well, I'm, I'm not wrong. That's his opinion, whatever. Then I can change
Right.
the whole way that came up. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm that way, or have been. I'm better now, but especially when my current wife and I, we've been married for just over 20 years, 21 coming up in November. And before that, money is always a big thing, for
Sure.
me, not having enough. I was, not that we have money now, but I was very poor growing up, and I did not want to be that way. But then we have kids. So, it's like, so if we're not having enough or whatever, my immediate, reaction kicks in, and I start stressing about everything, and,
Right.
unreasonably so, I mean, you have to worry about it, but I was just like way over the top. So, I've gotten better about it as I get older, but
For sure.
I'm
Yeah.
53 this year, so in September. So,
Hopefully, we get a
um,
little wiser as we get older.
let's hope. Or maybe it's just the fact that we don't care as much about some
Right. I'm
things.
sure there's probably both. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So, um, but okay. So let's see. Is there Is there any advice you might give to people that, like, if you were to, you know, uh, that found themselves in this estrangement? My goodness, I couldn't even speak. So that you would think would be helpful.
Not really. I mean, I think, like for me to give other people advice, I think it's a stretch because I don't know where they're coming from. I could only speak
Sure.
from how I handled things, how um,
Yeah,
uh, I know Michelle talked about the death of our son.
she did.
That
Yeah.
I was like, I almost feel like I had been training for 5 years to deal with that.
Mm,
Um, I didn't know it was coming, but
right.
the training that I was putting myself through to learn how to cope, I don't know what I would have done without out if it had been 5 years earlier without those tools. So, I mean, I would have
Right.
coped in some. Um, yeah, advice for others. I don't know. Do what you got to do. I can only look to what I I have spiritual teachers that I go to. I mean, I don't really
Yeah.
believe in anything, but I have
Right.
that I listen to that I think make a lot of sense. So that I try to you know implore what they're doing, and
Yeah.
just um,
Okay.
it
No,
helps.
that's, yeah. I mean, like I said, everybody's a little different. So what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another, and that's kind of an annoying thing that I find with a lot of people. They'll say, "Well, just do this."
Yeah,
Well, that's not necessarily. I mean, it might work, but it might not work. So,
and
um,
everybody's at a different place. I mean,
yeah,
if I'm at a place, I mean, I've talked to people about the way I do things, and they're in a different place, and trying to help them, and give them some advice, and they're in such a different place that they don't even understand what I'm talking about. It's just not even in their
no,
realm. So I'm just wasting their time. It's like they need to find their own way.
yeah. Well, it's like people that either haven't been estranged from their kids or other family members, or have a death in the family. They don't understand, you know. I mean, everybody deals with death at some point, but to the death of a child, unless you've been through that, I don't see. I mean, you could be there for the person, if they need to chat, vent, whatever. But beyond that, I don't know what you just don't understand if you haven't been through it. So,
Yeah. From
so
my
for sure.
perspective, I don't even think like I understand how it affected me, and
Right.
I could have a glimpse of how it would affect someone else. But again, they're coming from a different place, so I don't know. You
Yeah.
know, I can't say that I understand. I mean, I've talked to quite a few people who've lost children. It comes up quite a bit.
I'm sure.
There's a lot of them when you think. I mean, when you think of every young person that dies, and lots of them die.
Yeah.
Parents out there that have lost their kids, and and in the estrangement, that there's people all over that don't, that are not in contact with their kids.
Yeah.
And I never really considered that even an option. I always, we had this tight little family, and I just figured that would just continue on into I'd
Yeah.
be grandkids, and everything would be cool, and just didn't work out that way.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I had no idea that this would happen this way. I knew we would have, fussing things at each
Sure.
other and, major disagreements, maybe even, but I just never thought it would be like, okay, I'm done with you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
It's I don't know. It's a little disheartening to that just isn't in my. Um, I think everyone has a different level of empathy, maybe
right.
that you know maybe some of my kids aren't able to put themselves in my shoes. You know what I mean? They just doesn't. They're just not there. And it's weird because I have five, right? And
Right.
every one of them was born with a certain personality. I mean, it morphed through things, but they were all who they were when they were born. I mean, the quiet one was always quiet. The active one was always active.
Right.
The laid back one was always laid back. It, they started out that way, and they're still that way.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of personality built in, I think,
Wow.
and it
Yeah. That's
definitely wasn't, nurture. It was nature. So there's
right. How do you deal with it, or maybe initially how you were dealing with it when people would say, "How's so and so your estranged daughter?" Um, without like spewing everything.
I didn't really talk about it a whole lot outside the family.
Okay.
Um, Talked about it with the other kids some, which was maybe a mistake. I probably shouldn't have talked to them. Um, but they were experiencing it too. Some of my younger kids were
Right.
also estranged from the older. You know.
Yeah, with my son when it happened, my youngest, she happened to be in the car with us when it was a messaging back and forth thing, and the more we tried to say something, the worse it got understood. And she
Sure.
was there with us, and so she kind of witnessed it from the beginning. And then they were annoyed that we wanted to, or that she was around when we wanted to have a conversation. And I'm like, well, she was there when this all started. She was 16 at the time almost. So it's not like a baby where I could like
Yeah.
hide it from her. But then they got really upset that she knew and whatever. And I'm like,
Sure.
so, I mean, I get it, but you know, uh, we never really kept things from them of importance like that. We didn't want them to worry about the day-to-day stuff, the bills and, all of that stuff. But, as far as important things, we never kept that kind of stuff from them. So,
Sure.
I'm not sure why it would have been a big surprise. So, but yeah, I hear you.
Well, I don't know if Michelle. Well, like I recently became estranged from my living son, the one son that's alive.
Oh, okay.
And that's just been recent, like in a month, maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, a month ago or something.
Hmm.
Uh, and there were some behaviors that were going on, um, and we basically had a, it was a highly emotional day. Um, we were having a custody thing with my granddaughter, who of my son who's deceased,
Right.
coming out of court. It was just like a perfect storm.
I think she did mention
If you mentioned that, and
briefly that there was
yeah,
something going on with him. Yeah.
we drove from downtown Phoenix out to the suburbs where we live, and in the process, we were having a conversation. I was already highly emotional from the outcome of that,
Right.
and I just lost my cool on him. And I don't usually do that. I'm like super like I don't lose my cool. I'm very conscious of it. I used to a lot, and
Right.
I pay attention to it, and I pretty much lost it. And um, he stormed off, and that was the end of that. And I sent him a text the next day, blocked me, and I sent him a text and said, "Hey, I shouldn't have treated you that way. I
Yeah.
apologize." But that's the last I've heard from him. So, and I'm
Mm.
blocked. And I know that I think there's spouses involved that are. I mean, he actually said that his girlfriend would be pleased if we were out of the picture. I mean, that was
Mm.
part of the thing and he has a couple of kids, so a couple of grandkids with him. He has a little baby that's.
Right. So I'd like to thank Paul for coming on the show today. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help me grow and help me reach more people. Also, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free to email me at beyondthepainpodcast@gmail.com. Also, remember to live beyond the pain.